Well, welcome everybody, and thank you so much for joining us on this lovely spring evening that we have planned. As the co-director of the Special Education Learning Disabilities program here at American University, I feel really fortunate to get to meet some pretty reputable alumni from our past, many of which I didn't have the honor of teaching because I am a newer faculty member at American University. Yet their legacies have lived on, and I'm just thrilled that we have so many people willing to come and share their experiences with us tonight. I will give just a brief introduction of our guests and then give them an opportunity to kind of introduce where and who they are in the space that they're in today. And then I have some questions that will guide our discussion, and certainly we'll end by opening up a forum for other folks that have questions. Just before we start, I recognize that, many of us are struggling with the challenges of a global health pandemic, after effects and existing effects of living in that pandemic. We are also seeing our country really face racism head on in a way that is unique for many of us in our generation. And I appreciate that we can all take pause in our busy lives and honor the work that we're doing. I think we could all agree on this panel and abroad that any student, let alone a student with exceptionalities, needs good teachers, therapeutic teachers, data-driven teachers more than ever. So I'm really pleased to introduce this panel to you guys. I don't necessarily know what the screen will look like for everyone else, but I'll go in the order I have and then let them introduce themselves as well. But joining us tonight is Erica Gillespie, who graduated in 2017 and is currently serving as the Associate Director of Student Services at the University of Pennsylvania. I also have Matt Cahill here from the class of 18, who's currently a middle school history teacher at Stafford Friends School, and was an alumni of the lab, what is now called the Lab Fellowship here at American University. I'd also like to introduce Elizabeth Toth, who is currently the Diverse Learning Case Manager for KIP in Chicago. And I know we have some KIP folks on our neck of the woods too, so happy to bring you aboard. And last but certainly not least, I'd like to introduce Kim Palumbo, who is currently Department Chair of Learning Resources at Georgetown Day School. And my sincere apologies if I didn't get anybody's name right. Please feel free to correct as I invite you to introduce yourself. And to avoid those awkward pauses in Zoom, what I'll do is invite somebody to introduce themselves and then please invite somebody else as we go through. And once everyone's introduced, I will go ahead and start our questions for the evening. So Elizabeth or Liz, I'd like to invite you to kick us off.
Just wanted to say hi and thank you for having me tonight. Sometimes I know when these are in person, when you are halfway around the country, it's hard to do a panel like this. So it's great to kind of have that virtual opportunity to reach out and meet other people. But I finished up my program in 2015 and I was concurrently teaching at E.L. Haynes Public Charter School in DC, where I dabbled between being a general education teacher and a special education teacher. And after I finished my program at American and kind of decided to move back home to Chicago, I've been teaching at KIP Chicago in a neighborhood called North Lawndale. It's on the west side of the city. I'm rounding out my 7th year there. Similarly, I've dabbled between the general education and special education. I transitioned into an assistant principal for about 2 years. And this year, I am now the case manager for our diverse learners, as we call them here in Chicago. So I'm managing and coaching our special education teachers, as well as the paperwork and compliance end for all of our diverse learners. And then I'm supposed to pass the torch. Matt, go ahead.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I was just thinking about American last night because I have the one piece of memorabilia that I got during my time at American, which is a sweatshirt that I wear proudly for my students to see that, hey, college is a option for you guys later down the road. Uh, uh, in a Down at AU, I was teaching at the lab school while I was getting my master's. So I spent uh, over 12 hours a day down at the lab school of Washington, teaching and then being in the boardroom for 2.5 hours, uh, learning as well. I moved back to Philadelphia after graduated, and I decided to do a welcome back Carter kind of teaching experience where I teach now, uh, is where I first learned that I have a learning disability in third grade. So I have the perspective of not only being a teacher at the school, but also being a former student as well, teaching history and literacy. Erica?
Thank you. As Adelaide said, my name is Erica Gillespie. I am an Associate Director of Student Disability Services at the University of Pennsylvania. So a little different than the traditional career path for this program, but I wouldn't change anything about my time in the program or my career path. I work very closely with students with all kinds of different diagnoses, disabilities, medical conditions in setting up their accommodations for success in higher education. Um, I also work very closely for like housing, dining, and transportation accommodations. So like I feel so lucky that I get the academic piece, which I learned so much about in my program, but I also was exposed to this other housing, dining, transportation area that allows me to continue to grow, continue to better understand students with disabilities needs. Um, yeah, I think I worked full time throughout my time in the program at American in their disability office. And then I eventually transitioned to the University of Pennsylvania in 2019. Thanks. Go ahead, Kim.
Hi, I'm Kim Palumbo. I graduated from AU as an undergrad in 2007, and then with my master's in 2008 in the Learning Disabilities program. I also completed the lab school fellowship while I was at AU and was Sally Smith's last graduate assistant upon her passing. And so AU holds a super special place in my heart. I also drive by AU every day. I've never left DC. And after I graduated, I moved to Georgetown Day School as a learning specialist. I stayed there for a couple of years, and then I was predominantly supporting literacy in the upper elementary school, those intermediate years. And then I went to get my doctorate in learning disabilities from the University of Maryland. And so I did that and moved to another independent school here as a director of student support. And then an opportunity to transition back to GDS opened up, and it's my 5th year back at GDS. So I am our chair of learning resources. I direct our 7 full-time learning specialists across 3 divisions. And we're a school that has about 1,100 students, and we are situated right in Tenleytown. So I spend a lot of time on my commute from Capitol Hill to Upper Northwest, driving by GDS, and my son knows every time we drive by that that's where I went to college, and so AU is a super special spot for me.
Wonderful. And again, thank you all for your time and energy tonight, and just opening us up to the vast array of experiences that we have outside of our master's degree. For viewers who didn't know, Sally Smith is the founder of our program and the founder of the lab school, and holds a close place in all of our hearts for really changing the way we think about teaching students with learning differences. and how we can integrate arts and think outside the box and truly meet students' needs. So Kim, that was super touching to hear. I'm glad to have that sort of intersectionality with you as well. So I have a series of questions just to kind of guide our conversation. Even though, as Liz pointed out, we are spread across the country. We are all united in our love for the work that we do. And with that sort of motive, I think we can just sort of popcorn these questions as best we can. And you guys can give insight to the next generation who is facing challenges unlike those that we had when we entered the field, that is for sure. So the first question I have is, how did your AU degree best help prepare you for your career now? So what did it give you that prepared you for where you are today?
I'll start. It has been one of the best networking opportunities in terms of when I was in the program, I was a young teacher. It was my first, second, and third year teaching right out of undergrad. And, you know, you get very bogged down, and the school that you're teaching at is all that you know. And it was such a great experience to kind of like dive into teaching during the day, but then debrief and learn from my peers and expert teachers after school. And it really became like a great sounding board, but also an added level of professional development that I could bring back to school the next day.
Thank you, Liz. Matt, did I see that you had something to share?
Yeah, sorry. One of the things that I really valued in my AU education is that I have, in my undergrad, I just learned how to be a teacher, like how to do an anticipatory set and all that jazz. But AU really helped me really understand how to approach students and understand their language and their reading difficulties and ways to accommodate them in any subject. So as a history teacher now, you know, as opposed to before, I would only be focusing on the content, but now it is more of a focus on incorporating the comprehension strategies, including like annotating visualization of a text, in addition to how do you incorporate writing strategies within it as well. On top of that, how do you differentiate as well? Because you have students with a vast amount of learning issues as well, and just doing that task analysis of figuring out how to help each student is what I really valued in my AU education.
Great, thank you. Kim or Erica, anything else you'd like to add?
Sure. My education at AU changed my life. I did not know what I wanted to do, but I knew I wanted to work with students with disabilities, but didn't really have an idea of like how or where or. So I started working at AU, and then I found this program, met with Sarah, and was like, this is it. This is what I want to study. This is what I want to pursue. And that was really, it was eye-opening to me because I learned so much about education in those two and a half years. I don't remember. It flew by. And it prepared me to be in a really unique spot of having this diverse, extensive education of K-12, but working in higher ed. So I know where freshmen are coming from when they are first identifying with our office. I know if I ask if they have an IEP or 504 plan. I know the difference. Parents are super impressed with that. And I think without this program at AU, I honestly feel like I would have ended up pursuing something in psychology or a master's in psychology, but like, and with that, I don't think I'd be doing this position, which I love and I'm really grateful to have. So I'm just really lucky that I got a job at AU and that I found this program. Yeah, it was a great experience.
Well, I can't sit out of this fest of how AU set me up for my career. You know, AU gave me, and I mean, I'm not making this up. I say this all the time. AU gave me my special ed lenses, my glasses. And like, when you put them on, like, you will never take them off. I can't look at any classroom. I can't look at any child. I can't look at my own child. I have special ed glasses on. And, you know, Sally used to say, special education is education that is special. And, you know, I think if you hear that, it's really easy to let something like that just like fly right by you. But that is exactly what the AU special ed program is all about, is how do I make this experience for this child joyful and appropriate, and not even appropriate, good, way beyond appropriate, right? And to me, you know, there's not a parent. I was in a parent meeting today, you know, and certainly like every day has something hard and a challenge, you know, especially now. And I don't always see eye to eye, right, with every family I interact with, and we may have different views on what might be the best step forward. But AU gave me those glasses, and like, I can never sit down with a family and not share that perspective with them, and not know that we're talking about a kid first. And even if we're in kind of a bumpy relationship, and that happens sometimes, we're there for the kid. This is about the kid, and this is about making the experience for the child as joyful and also you know, specialized as possible, so that we can really find out what is possible for that kid. This isn't about us. And that's really AU, you know, gave me that lens, and everything else came after that lens. So yeah.
I mean, Max, could we have asked for 4 more amazing answers than those? The diversity of the takeaways that become this big picture of just totally transformative education that pivoted your careers is so amazing to hear. The next question that I'll pose to the group is, what do you wish you knew before you had started your current career?
I think for me, and in my positions, how hard the conversation would be on students, on teachers or faculty or parents who don't get it. And, you know, with parents, you can form this like special relationship and help them better understand their child's learning. But in my role, I'm dealing with faculty members at an Ivy League institution. They are set in their ways, most of them. And I find myself having these really tough conversations with these faculty members about why they have to implement accommodations and why this is important. And, you know, I don't just want to rely on like, this is a legal obligation. I want, like, this is important for so many other reasons beyond the legal stuff. But the legal stuff is helpful when it's needed to be used.
Thank you for sharing that, Erica. Like, brought me right back to where Liz started us off with how important networking is, because having those difficult conversations, I would hope, become a lot easier because we have this network. I mean, once an eagle, always an eagle is what we say, right? Anybody else? Any hindsight 2020, something we wish we knew before we started our career?
You know, I think for me, sometimes the progress is really, really small. And I've taught a bunch of classes at AU over the years, and I've told this story in every single one of them. But, you know, when you're out and about, when I was young and single in DC and out and about, and somebody said, "Oh, what do you do?" And I said, "Oh, I'm a teacher." And they were like, "Oh, that's great." You know, and then they would say, "Oh, well, what do you teach?" And I'd say, "I teach special ed." And they would go, "Oh, you're so patient. You're so sweet." You whatever. And what I really wanted to say is actually special ed teachers are like some of the most impatient people I know, because like if we don't get like a response to intervention, like boom, I'm trying the next thing, I'm moving on. Like we're about data, I want results. And in reality, sometimes progress is really minuscule. It looks that way. And it takes a great amount of patience and really walking those difficult conversations with teachers or families. I mean, I'll make copies for any teacher at my school. Like, I mean, I will do anything for a teacher if it means that I build our relationship so that then I can get some accommodations back from them later, So it's really about relationships, but sometimes the progress is really small. And I guess I thought, I was going to see a kid jump levels in reading in ways that it doesn't work exactly like that. And that's okay, and so giving yourself the bandwidth and patience to watch growth unfold as it actually does is it will save you a lot of, or some heartache, which I think is always a good thing.
Thank you, Kim.
I think somewhat similarly, it's just important to remember that things don't always go as planned. I think, in grad school, and I kind of had these building blocks of how I was going to get where I wanted professionally and how I was going to make that happen. And the reality is things don't go as planned quite frequently. And whether that is like the lesson plans that you have during the day in front of kids, or like year to year what you're doing as a teacher and what grade level you're in. And I think if I could tell my younger self in my younger and mid-20s, that those missteps are actually like the most important pieces of the building blocks in your career, because that's when you get the most exposure to things that were maybe outside of your comfort level or outside of your ZPD. So it's okay when things don't go as planned, and often I think it really ends up for the better.
Thank you. Matt, I just wanted to make sure I gave you the opportunity before I threw another question.
Oh yeah, I mean, everything that everyone said is right on. The thing that I was thinking of when I heard people speaking is that just because you have a master's in learning disabilities doesn't mean you're a master in every student with a learning disability you see. There will be students that will test your limits and your knowledge of education and how to best empower every student.
Thank you. So true, guys. I just, what a lucky program director to have these alumni on the panel. So as I joined American University, which didn't intersect with your time at American University, the School of Education separated and became its own independent school, something we're incredibly proud of. And as you know from your work here, we have always deeply rooted our work in equity in education. And as Dean Holcomb McCoy came on and helped us shape our mission, we really helped switch a lens to using our anti-racist pedagogy to push that mission forward, right? To really bring equity to education. And this is something that I think we all believe in very deeply, and I think our current state of affairs, at least nationally, right here in the U.S., but certainly globally as well, have really brought to light how important the teacher's role is in this work. So I'm curious how you bring that equity piece, that anti-racist piece, into the role that you're currently occupying in the field. How do you see yourself being that change maker? It's a big question.
So me and my team this year decided to make it a priority to have those tough conversations, just with everything that happened last summer with George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter protests. So we decided to change our entire literacy curriculum to have a focus on equity and have a focus on the African American experience throughout our history, and having students learn about redlining and segregation. And at first we were like, well, is this going to be appropriate for our students, or is it just going to go over their head? But it hasn't. It's something that students have seen on a daily basis and just want to learn more about. So just something that we've done since we teach students with learning disabilities, just making sure that it is at their level, that we are continuing to have them practice strategies that they need in order to meet the standards of a middle school literacy program, but making sure that they have a voice in what is going on as well.
Thank you.
I'll just jump off of that piece, the making sure students have a voice. I think, I'm not in a classroom teaching in the traditional way, but I still see myself as an educator. And I think it's really important for students of any age to find their voice and to have their voice, and to have their voice be heard. And it's really challenging to sometimes. So we have a group of students called FIGLY students, first generation low income students. And it's hard for them to sit in my office and say, like, I have these challenges. Some of them say, I don't know how I got into Penn. I don't know how I made it this far with my challenges. And it's my role to, have them believe in themselves. And I always say to myself, it's my job to believe in other people's children, and to believe them and to believe their story, and to kind of carry that with me as I'm helping them and setting up accommodations, so that they feel like they're still being true to themselves while also receiving accommodations, and how they can make their accommodations their own and make it work for them. And they might need it for this class, but not that class. And, they are fine talking to this professor, but they want me to talk to the other professors. And, just working out a plan so specific with each and every student to make them feel like they're comfortable, they're doing the right thing for themselves, and that I'm here to support them and believe in them.
Knowing how the data, like if we know the data of outcomes post-secondary, I think any school would be lucky to have Erica and her team working on the student front. The way you bring that lens is amazing. Sorry, Liz, go ahead.
That's okay. I just have to say, I'm so grateful to be working in a school and an environment where we put race and equity at the forefront of so many of our conversations. I think and from other friends and teachers, and my mom's a teacher, and if the conversation isn't being led by the people that are leading your school and the people that are making decisions for your school, it's not feeding into the staff culture or the kid culture. And it really is just such a big difference to be working in a community where everybody has the same beliefs and everybody is working to make it better. And most of my career, I've been working at schools where I am the minority. It's been a predominantly African American community. And I have committed to doing the work that I need to do. But I think it starts with me being a better listener, to understand and hear from the perspective of someone else. And Erica, to your comment earlier, there are hard conversations sometimes. And the reality is it starts with listening. It starts with unpacking a lot of things. And as a school and as a staff, we've done a lot of really interesting work around the history of our neighborhood, which is directly connected to the history of our families. And, I've been born and raised in Chicago, and there was a lot of things that I didn't even know until we started unpacking a lot of the culture and community around our school. And when you're able to make those connections and really unpack that generational history and listen at the same time, you understand a lot more about why certain things are the way they are, and how there may be opportunities to improve them.
Thank you.
I just to build on what was said. Thank you so much for that. I work at the first integrated school in Washington, D.C. GDS was founded in 1945 by 3 Black families and 4 white families. And that being said, we're a private school, and equity has to be at the forefront of everything that we talk about for so many reasons. One, because it's the right thing to do and the just thing to do, and also because we could very easily be part of a larger systemic issue if we don't talk about it. And I'd be, of course, we're part of that system, and it's actively being anti-racist that will help to mitigate and some of the power and privilege that we bring to the table, and also lift up members of the community and that need to be. I'm thinking a lot around race and equity right now as it relates to identification. Given the global pandemic, I'm very, very cautious of referral at the moment. Referral is assessing many other things besides the criteria for a disability. And I am leading lots of conversations with reaching out to local evaluators. I'm working with our families and our school leadership on how we are supporting the needs of students and addressing gaps in instruction because of COVID. And this is true of, if you have been a student in the last 13 months, you have been touched by this. And so it doesn't matter if you went to this school or this school or this school, you are going to have gaps in your instructional minutes. That's just the reality of our situation. And I worry about the next 13 months and what will happen with identification as it relates to, especially for BIPOC groups and students who have other aspects of their identity that have historically put them in an over-identified category. So I also think, and I could talk for a long time about this. And then the other piece of that is over-identification. Working in a place like Georgetown Day School, over-identification of certain groups looks very different than it does in other school settings. So we have kind of, sometimes I think you're at risk for under-identification of certain groups and over-identification of other groups. And that's because money and power and privilege play into all of these of accommodations and access. We've seen it at a large scale with Varsity Blues, and I see it also on a day-to-day basis, just from parents wanting the best for their kid, and also us needing to be really responsive to what that actually means and using data to inform those directions. So anyway, I mean, special education is the place where equity can actually happen in education, period. That's like, special education was created so that we could have equitable access to education. And in 2021, we're still, we need to fight that battle at every single day. And so I think if it's not central to your work as a special educator, then you're missing a big piece of the work. So I think, yeah.
I could not add anything greater to that. I am going to go out of order in my questions, though, because I think this is a really good segue. Kim, you spoke with such passion about like our current events and that role that it plays. What advice would you give on somebody who's entering the teaching profession now, in terms of the unprecedented educational experience that they will be embarking on, right? So what advice would you give a student who thinks, you know what, I think I want to teach this generation. I want to teach the COVID generation of students. besides be patient?
I
and
mean, that's going to be a hard question to answer because we're still learning about that too. I think, and maybe it's just that. That's great. I think you should do it. And you don't know what you think you do. Just like every single person in this room, like keep reading, keep being a posture, like you have to be a student, and use observation and build relationships and really understand a student's circumstances. Being a member of the COVID generation for 100 kids is 100 different scenarios, 100 different situations, 100 different family dynamics, 100 different, loss has looked different for every single one of those 100 children. Their minutes of instruction has been different. I mean, like, you have to be a researcher and really be learning about those kids. Because I think what we're about to see transpire in education is going to be, like, the ripple effect is going to be for decades. We will continue to see some of these challenges. My first graders who are COVID students are totally different. They have a totally different impact than my 12th graders. And, we need to be talking about this in every meeting that we're having with teachers and leadership and families now, given how long and lasting this impact will be. I mean, yeah.
I think something with our younger teachers and newer teachers to the profession, often the first few years, you're spinning a lot of your wheels, time and energy on classroom management. And while that is still existing during the pandemic through virtual learning, a lot of our younger teachers this year have had the opportunity to grow and thrive in their content and curriculum development, which is something that I don't know if first, second, third year teachers always get to dabble in as much because the time and the energy is spent managing a classroom for the first time. And so if you're out there, like, learn all the content, dive in, right? Like, ask for help and feedback on your lesson plans and your IEPs and your 504s, whatever you may be doing. Because when we're back in person, I think the classroom management side is really going to swing the pendulum back the other way for us to put more time and energy adjusting kids back to being in school full time.
Yeah. Great observation, though, on how to capitalize on the opportunity to learn something that we can all agree first year teachers struggle with because of that. Great insight. Eric or Matt?
Yeah, well, one of the things that the pandemic has done is that it took the first year teacher to the 30-year experienced teacher, and it evened the playing field, because in March, everybody had to learn how to do a Zoom classroom and use technology in an effective way to engage students. So one of the things that, was a priority to me last summer, where usually I'm on the beach relaxing, I spent a lot of time taking extra classes in learning how to use the technology of like Nearpods and Flipgrids in order to engage with this, I guess, COVID generation of students that we're dealing with now, because not only are the students tech savvy enough, but it's also a great way of incorporating technology. We've been talking years, like, education's going to change. We're going to be using technology more than ever before. Well, I mean, I was on the computer all day. My students were on the computer all day using various forms of interacting with lesson plans. So it is right now to use that service and resources, but also just remember that you're fresh blood, not blood, but whatever. To a lot of teachers who, it's been a tough 18 months for teaching as well. It's longer days, just trying to relearn this wheel that we thought we knew for years and just had to completely adapt along. So just remember that you're fresh and use that freshness to help inspire educators.
I think a couple things are running through my head, but something that was said to me at the very start of the pandemic was, now's not a time to try something new. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like, now is when we have to do something new. Like, I was like, what? I was so, so part of it is like, yes, we don't want to, do backflips while we're teaching Zoom. But like, I think now's the time where we do have to try stuff that's new. We do have to work even closer with our teachers, our teams, our students, our parents, to make sure that's, little things are being met. Like, for example, my lighting is horrible at night in here. I'm like sitting in a black ditch. But like, what if a student had class right now? Like, what were they going to do with their lighting? And what are they going to do with do they have a desk? Do they like, so I'm ranting now, but my advice would be like, my advice would be like, always try your best. Like, go to bed at night saying like, I did my best today, and my best right now might look different than my best in 2019, but did I do my best today? Did I do the best I can to help students and serve students? Did I think about access in different ways, because we're in different times? And I always encourage my team, like, did you do your best today? That's all I really care about. I mean, to an extent, but I'm done talking for now.
Thank you so much. To honor our time, I will give us one last question to transition us to the next part of our long and never-ending days. And that is, did the degree open any doors for you professionally that were unexpected, or just sort of a door that maybe you weren't expecting, but was opened because of your degree?
Oh, go ahead.
I got to teach 2 semesters of Foundations of Special Education for the Exceptional Children, and that was a chance of a lifetime that I would never give up. And I also found a passion for school psychology. So I am planning to pursue a PhD in school psychology. Thank you. Thank you. So that kind of opened, like, if I never took Dr. Durham's educational assessment class, I would never have known I had this like love for assessment and diagnosis and evaluation. So that and teaching the class were 2 really big opportunities that came out of this program.
Thank you. I saw Liz and I think Kim as well.
Yeah, frankly, the job that I transitioned into this year, as I mentioned way back at the beginning, I dabbled between special education and general education. And as I met other teachers, it was very clear that special education teachers are the most well-rounded, because, to also circle to Kim's comment earlier, once you put those glasses on, you see the classroom in a whole different way. And I kind of always, once I was on the gen ed side, I knew I always wanted to make my way back to special education. And when this case managing position came available, it brought me back to those assessment classes. It brought me back to those foundation classes. And I was like, oh yeah, this is the right fit. This is what I want to do. And I guess I said it earlier too, but like, sometimes you take a little bit of a different path. But if you would have asked me what job I wanted when I was in grad school, is probably something similar to this. And 6-7 years later, I'm glad I had the degree that is a good fit for what was in front of me.
Awesome.
Lots of doors, I would say. Certainly career opportunities, that the job I took immediately after graduating. But I would say pursuing my doctorate in learning disabilities is probably the most significant door that it opened. That, I mean, was an amazing experience, an enormous amount of work, but I co-authored a chapter in the Handbook of Learning Disabilities while I was a doctoral student at Maryland. I've done a doc internship at the Department of Ed. And, I did a mixed method study for my dissertation. I worked on qualitative and quantitative research, and I've taken that and done things in my current role to run research studies at Georgetown Day School. And so many doors. I think AU is a place that calls out something in students that I think sometimes we don't know is there. I certainly didn't know that was there when I arrived at AU as a freshman. I never imagined that I'd be sitting in this place. And that's true both of my undergrad when I worked with David Sadker. I mean, like, so many amazing people. And then in the master's program in LD. So I think it's just also the culture of AU is a very, there's a lot of possibility at AU. And so that's carried me through to today.
Thank you.
For me, it's just when I moved back to Philly, there's a Philly area filled with tons of public charter and private schools. And, even though I was familiar with them, I didn't have any contacts with them. But when I started talking to people saying that I did graduate from AU and did a fellowship at the lab school, right away, they're like, oh, AU lab school. And right away that started conversations right away. So just from a networking standpoint, it is just a great way to build professional relationships with people all across the area.
Thank you. And to bring it absolutely full circle where we started with Liz talking about networking, and very transparently, I have not met any of our panelists face to face, nor did I have the honor to teach them during their time in our program. Yet I feel as connected to the faces on this screen as I do my current students and former students that I have taught, because the line of thinking, the passion about the work we do, the fact that I literally and metaphorically have on my special education lenses, I mean, the connectivity, hearing about Matt leverage his curriculum in the moment to meet the needs of the nation and his classroom. It speaks volumes, I think, to Kim's point about the culture that we create, because I could bump into any of you on the street and feel instantly like we are kindred spirits. We think alike, and we are pursuing the same path in uniquely different ways, which I think is really exciting for people to hear. I myself never thought I'd leave the classroom, right? I thought I'd be a K-12 teacher for the rest of my life, and ended up finding a love of preparing teachers. So, with that, I know we are running low on time. I could not be more grateful to have your expertise, your knowledge, your passion, and an hour of your time for the next generation of teachers, all of which are lucky to now say you are part of their network, right? So thank you very much. Congratulations on all the accomplishments, and hurrah to those that will come, because it's not like your journey is done. I think there's a lot to be had. Max?
Well, I mean, you pretty much said everything there is to say, but this was really inspiring for me as a new SOE member. It's hard to be newer than you are, but I managed it somehow. Just one big final thank you to all of our alumni. Both our current and future students are really going to benefit from your knowledge and your perspective. I will be sure to send this to you so that you can share it as well. But with that, that closes our recording.